México ha realizado grandes obras, instalaciones deportivas y villas olímpicas para alojar a miles de atletas. Los productos... Para levantar en alto las banderas democráticas y revolucionarias por las que luchamos. El gobierno, en estos históricos momentos, nos escucha y siente nuestra fortaleza organizada. Declaro inaugurados los Juegos Olímpicos de México, que conmemoran la 19ª Olimpiada de la era moderna.
It was the decades of the 50s and the 60s. The world was being turned upside down with a vast social transformation happening across the globe. The Cultural Revolution in Mao Zedong's China, Castro and the Cuban Revolution, and the Civil Rights Movement and Sexual Revolution in the United States. In general, the establishment generation was being challenged by the new left.
Pero de lo que estoy más orgulloso de esos 6 años es del año de 1968, porque me permitió servir y salvar al país, les guste o no les guste, con algo más que horas de trabajo burocrático, poniéndolo todo.
A government headed by Gustavo Díaz Ordaz of the Institutional Revolutionary Party, or PRI, had all the reasons to be considered an effective government in the 1960s. The economic prosperity of Mexico could have not been better. The country was enjoying its period known as the Mexican Miracle. Infrastructure developments such as roads, subway systems, and venues vitalized the Mexican economy. An example of such achievements of the nation was Tlatelolco, an area in the Cuauhtémoc borough of Mexico City, centered on the Square of Three Cultures and surrounded by Aztec ruins, a Franciscan chapel, and the Conjunto Urbano known as Alto Tlatelolco, being the largest apartment complex in Mexico. Foreign companies such as Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and Volkswagen also added jobs to the North American nation. The recent nationalization of oil, petroleum, electrical, and communications industries allowed the domestic economy to expand. Although Mexico was enjoying economic triumphs, the greatest victory was the Olympics of 1968. And this year, Mexico became the first Latin American country to host this prestigious event.
Hosting the Olympics, it was meant to be a big statement about Mexico's development and its place in the world, its rising place in the world.
Being a perfect opportunity for Mexico to show its rich and vast culture. However, the student movement of 1968 represented an affront.
In Mexico, the movement toward democratization began in July of 1968 when students from National Polytechnic Institute, or Politécnico, and the National Autonomous University of Mexico, or UNAM, protagonized a street fight at the Plaza of the Ciudadela. To prevent that the conflict escalated, the infamous Mexican police division known as the Granaderos went to the site of the conflict to stop the fight. However, the methods that they used to pacify the strife were brutal. Influenced by the progressive international forces, the response of the students came in the form of organized protests.
The student movement was then born.
The National Strike Council, or CNH, was formed. It comprised chiefly of student leaders of the Politécnico and UNAM, such as Luis Cervantes Cabeza de Vaca. CNH then issued 6 demands towards the Mexican government as a response for the police violence, which became the doctrine and impetus of the Mexican student movement.
De veras, no lo entiendes. Yo lo único que entiendo es que ustedes no tienen por qué andar metidos en esto. ¡No, sí tenemos, mamá! Todos los estudiantes del país están en lucha.
Eventually, both adults and professors became a part of the movement, joining the students by flaunting the red and black colors, as well as by chanting, "We don't want Olympics, we want revolution." October 2nd, 1968. Only 10 days away from the Olympics, around 10,000 people gathered in La Plaza de las Tres Culturas to protest against the actions of the government. Near the end of the event, people began to notice two helicopters flying over the plaza. At around 5:55 p.m., two red flares were dropped from one of the helicopters, and then at 6:15, another two flares were dropped, one red and one green. This was the signal for 5,000 soldiers and 200 military tanks to surround the square and for the fire to be shot. The efforts of the National Strike Council to calm people in the crowd were not effective, as everyone panicked from the shock of what was occurring.
No me daba cuenta yo. No sabía qué estaba pasando en realidad. Sabía que los venían persiguiendo, pero no sabía por qué. Se oían los balazos, todo eso, el griterío, la gente asustada.
The massacre continued the remaining of the night with soldiers and the Batallón Olimpia, a secret branch of the government made to ensure the security of the Olympics. Receiving the orders to arrest the leaders of the National Strike Council, the student leaders were taken to the inside of the building Chihuahua and violently attacked. The armed forces then seized residency by residency from the apartment complexes, which are reported to have had no electricity during the day of the massacre.
Ay, plaza de Tlatelolco, como me duelen tus alas.
The next morning, newspapers gave account of 20 to 28 deaths. In 2001, the National Security Archive gave account of 300 to 400 deaths.
Y me fui a sentar muy triste ahí en mi estudio a ver qué había pasado, a poner el radio y la televisión. No había nada de noticias.
The journalistic obedience to political power and the direct intervention by the government in newspapers and magazines caused for articles to be toned down or censored, making news invisible for the readers to understand the context of the events. Newspapers were ordered not to use the word student when talking about the protests, but rather make claims of patriotic behaviors, robbing the victims of their legitimacy and justifying the violence made to them.
"50 years later, the massacre of Tlatelolco still stands as a symbol of Mexican democratization, marking a beginning in the demise of El PRI's political monopoly. In the year of 2000, Vicente Fox of the National Action Party, or PAN, was elected into the presidency of Mexico. During his presidency, Fox initiated investigations to honor the facts of Tlatelolco, establishing the National Institute of Access to Information, or INAI. This organism ensured that current and past government actions concerning the public would be disclosed. In addition to this, the establishment of multiple political parties began dissolving the one-party rule of El PRI. Eventually, in the year 2018, Andrés Manuel López Obrador was elected president under Partido del Trabajo and Morena, becoming the first left-wing president of the nation.
In essence, the ethos of the Mexican government of 1968 resembled that of the establishment generation, which tried to repress the movement of the new left to maintain its powerful status. It did so through dictatorial means of oppression, such as media manipulation and silencing dissent. But like most dictatorships, the governments and administrations that ensue them became more democratic and fair through time.
Eran letrados y pedían justicia, todos peleaban por un ideal, pero el gobierno